Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, he is a returning guest. He's a friend of the pod, a good friend of the pod, despite what he may think about his effect on our listenership. You could find him and his stuff at Bleacher Report. And also, speaking of friend of the pod, friend of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, because he has a podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Hardwood Knocks, awesome stuff. You can follow them at Hardwood Knocks on Twitter. And of course, you can follow him at Dan Favale because he is the one and only Dan Favale. Hello, Dan.
Hello, guys. Thank you for that fantastic intro. And thank you so much for having me back.
Andrew wrote a much meaner introduction in which I belittle you for essentially the entirety of the episode, but I thought better of it.
I'm not surprised that he wrote that. I'm actually surprised he can write is really what.
Wow. Dan. Wow. You're welcome for the recommendation on podcast equipment, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, you were just criticizing that equipment.
Nah, so next time you message me, hey, what mic should I get? You're gonna get the worst Yeti. You're gonna get one of those Yeti blues, like the Snowball that John used to use. That's what I'm going to recommend.
Now you're making fun of me because I used that for like 3 years.
I know. And then I showed up. And then what happened? Now you sound impeccable, Jonathan.
So I brought on Dan because I wanted to do a tanking pod, and I wanted just someone whose opinions on the NBA at large I respect greatly and doesn't just think about this crappy basketball team that we know and love. But before we get to that, I do want to do a little bit of a backstory because Andrew and Dan know each other from a ways back. And I don't think we've ever actually told this story on the pod. So I don't know which one of you wants to, like, how long have you guys known each other now?
I'll say it. So Dan, my cousins, shout out to my cousin Ryan, who's actually like a very loyal listener of Knicks Film School. And he's a patron and was like with us on playback last night. Is it that you and Ryan are close, or is it you, Ryan, and his brother, my other cousin David, are close?
Yeah, they're like two of my best friends. We go back like over a decade at this point. I don't know that I met you through them though. Are they the ones who brought you to pick up basketball? Because that's how I met you.
Yes, that's how I met you, because Davey, we were out playing basketball. This is when I tell you this is a month before we were stuck going inside. We all went on Super Bowl Sunday, the day the Chiefs beat the 49ers. Oh, wow. And we played pickup basketball because it was like a sunny day in February. And we were all out of shape, late 20, early 30-year-olds that played full court. And it went as well as a full court game would go. Dan, so this is where I've said in the past, Dan, that you actually need to represent my bona fides. Or I've told John that I may not look it, but I don't believe
this. Dan,
I have a wet jump shot, and that if you leave me open, I'll make you pay for it.
Does he have a wet jump shot, Dan?
I wouldn't call it wet. It's splat just because that sounds weird. But,
it does sound very strange. I don't feel comfortable with that.
He can go splash, and he's way more consistent than an Evan Fournier from beyond. Like if you're in crunch time, I'm going to trust him with an outside look more than I'm going to trust Evan Fournier at this point.
That's right.
That's not that big of a compliment. But two, I think that's fair. The other reason I want Andrew you on for this is because I know you have some pretty strong opinions on the subject that we're going to talk about today.
A little bit.
Yeah. And I'm curious where we go with this one. So before I know your opinions on tanking, which you can tell the audience in a bit, but Dan, let's start with this. Do you have any strong opinions on the merits of tanking, or are you just kind of like, I'll play it like I see it, depends on the situation type of deal?
Yeah, it's definitely situational, but I actually don't have strong opinions on tanking because I think to have strong opinions on it almost infers that it's a problem. And I really just don't view it as a problem in the league. I think the adjusted lottery odds certainly helped, but what the Sixers were doing were sort of way back when in the process era, that was like once in a generation, unprecedented type stuff when you're looking at how long it lasted. And until a bunch of these other teams started being that bad, I arguably view it as more criminal to be inadvertently crappy, like the Kings. Like that feels like a more of a malpractice than whatever happened in Philly, what people think that OKC is doing. And I get, one season tanks, I don't have a problem with either because you're still incentivized in the lottery system, if that's how you want to go about it, to try and get the worst record possible so you can get the highest pick possible, or at least have the best chance at it. And yes, I didn't like watching the process era Sixers, but have we ever seen anything like this. And I also finally think that sometimes we look at records or maybe even personnel, and we just assume that because the team is rebuilding, they're tanking. And I use Oklahoma City as an example because they throw out lineups that are egregious where you have to Google people's names sometimes. Like, I get it. They've been like not the worst team in the league this season when you watch them. They defend hard. They have interesting players on their roster. They've been able to discover some guys like an Aaron Wiggins or even a Trey Mann who might stick with them longer term.
Yeah.
So if you're going to flagrantly rebuild, that's fine with me. But I also kind of, we oversimplify it too by saying this team needs to tank. And if you are coached well enough or have even enough kind of competent players are never tanking. They're not trying to help you get guys who can replace them.
And coaches aren't tanking either. Like there are. I was about to say there are some terrible coaches in the league. I don't think Tom Thibodeau is a terrible coach, but like there are bad coaches. But like coaches don't know how to coach to lose, right? Like that's just not a thing that happens. I'm so happy you brought up OKC to start this thing off because like I actually think that they have kind of perfected the tank because they've done what Philly did, except better in that Philly ran a bunch of players out there on the court that like just flatly weren't NBA players. I mean, there were a few exceptions. Like obviously they got Covington out of that and like TJ McConnell has like carved out a nice career for himself. But for the most part, there were like a lot of non-NBA players. OKC, I feel like they've really mined some like gems, but at the same time, there's no back and forth with anybody about like, well, should these kids do they deserve to be playing because there's this veteran or that veteran on the bench? Like there are no veterans other than Derek Favors, who it's like he's a backup center, so it's no big deal. Like from my 2 cents, I think if I was looking objectively at like all the teams who weren't like out and out contenders, I kind of see OKC. I'm like, I think they're doing it the right way. So like I guess I'll transition to that. Like, do you think it's a smart strategy what they're doing? I understand it's a little bit different because they have like a million picks in the world, but generally speaking, do you like what they do?
I do, because I am a believer, even though people say you don't need to have these unproven quantities on the court getting game action. I'm a big believer in that those reps help. They help the player and they help teams glean information on the player when there are actual, presumably stakes involved. I do think their situation probably looks rosier because, as you alluded to, with the picks, and there's that possibility maybe they consolidate at any given point because they have all those picks. But it also creates a situation where you almost have to go this route. They have so many incoming picks that like they can't even fit them all on their payroll legally. And so you're going to have to start making quicker decisions on some of these players that are under your roof. So you have to play them to find that out. And so I find it, I don't want to use the word admirable, but I definitely find it legitimate to be like, hey, we're just going to cut out most of the veteran fat here. Like Kemba Walker, take your money, go to New York. We have Favors, we have Muscala. And it does seem like whether this is a Sam Presti thing, the players that they've instilled, Mark Daigneault, like, or if it's just Derek Favors and Mike Muscala are great leaders, you don't hear about like fractures and fissures or like weird dysfunction behind the scenes. And I think a lot of people look at, oh, you need that veteran presence to kind of reel everybody back in. Maybe they do have that. I don't want to slander, the Derek Favors here, but it seemed to be working out there perfectly fine. So I think it only becomes, I guess, really an issue if you're doing this on purpose for like a 5-6 year span or whatever it is. And that's just so rare.
Yeah, it is. Like you brought up Philly, and then there's like you brought up the Kings, who have inadvertently been tanking for the better part of 2 decades. But like, I think what's miraculous about, and we're going to transition to the Knicks because I want to get Andrew's input soon. What I think is so great about what OKC is doing, it's like, yes, they've gotten their asses handed to them a few times this season. They obviously had the worst loss in NBA history. They've had some other, big losses, but like, they're the second or third best team against the spread, I think, in the league this year, if not the first. Like they cover all the time. Like they surprise you. You watch them on just a random night, and you're like, oh wow, the Thunder are in it against the Nuggets. Randomly on like a Tuesday night. Like that happens a lot, and that's a credit to, I guess, their culture, their coaching, the guys they pick, like all of those things. Like if you're gonna do that, I think the notion of tanking is fine because it's like the whole thing that I think coaches push back on with this stuff is like, well, tanking sucks because you ingrain bad habits because there's no stakes, right? And I think that really like the tanking question is more a question about like, well, what is your organization about? Like how strong, how sturdy is your organization? Andrew, I know you are you as anti-tanking as it could be, or do you hold that there can be some merits to this as a plan? I'm curious.
I'm really glad that Dan specified that there's like a difference from what Philly did to what like we see with OKC and how Cleveland built what they built and what Golden State never really tanked. More Phoenix built what they built. I'm glad that we specify that there's a difference between focusing on development and letting the kids play out their mistakes on rosters that are largely bad. And then what Philly did, which was intentionally, and look, I've read Tanking to the Top and Jeremy and I got into it last night on Playback.
It's a great book.
And like, I've talked to Yaron about it and we just do not have proof that Hinkie had a competent plan to build out a team. He had a competent plan to sell off anything hinting talent to like get assets back. Like there just wasn't. All he did was draft Joel Embiid. That's literally the only thing he did successfully.
Oh, I mean,
that's Dan, you
what did he do? What did he do?
I mean, Ben Simmons was good.
He was fired before Ben Simmons. He was fired before the lottery.
The team was bad. They had Ben Simmons because the Hinkie era existed.
That is a completely fair point. My entire notion is that like
Jeremy Grant, Covington, like there were guys that came out of that. He mentioned TJ McConnell. They got to start there. So,
and I'm saying that if Hinkie was still around, he would have been like, oh, look, a talented player. Let me trade him for assets, which was like the continual rotation. The day he got fired, the notion around it was like nobody wants to go there because they know that they're just an asset, which to the point that Jeremy made last night was more that Hinkie's problem wasn't necessarily the plan was bad. It's that his communication to players, he was a terrible manager of people. I think Yaron makes that point in the book too.
Yeah.
I just like the best defense I think you could make for what Hinkie did is that he never would have made the Markelle Fultz, Jason Tatum trade. And we could be looking at Embiid, Simmons and Tatum today, which like if that had happened, then the process worked and like go have you.
Andrew,
what?
The process, I mean, we're recording this as the Nets are playing the Sixers. I haven't checked the betting odds recently, but I have to imagine the Sixers are no worse than what, a 2-1, 3-1 bet to win it all?
Oh, to win it all. So you're saying you're going to say the process worked because they got Simmons and traded him for Harden.
Well, I mean, they have Embiid, who is the Joel Embiid is. You can quibble about his health. He's played in more games than Kyrie Irving over the past 3 years at this point. So like you have one of the 5 best players in basketball, who's one of the top 3 MVP candidates this season, who without Harden probably doesn't even want to be there. I'm sure Daryl Morey factors into it as well. I do agree with you that it seems like Hinkie's biggest mistake was not only relationships with the players, but he rankled agents. And I'm more inclined to blame agents in a lot of these situations because what we call the Hinkie special now, the agents are letting players sign those like 4-year, very cheap deals where they're under team control for so long. And now Sam Presti's popularized it again in Oklahoma City. It's definitely more of a complex discussion, but the footprints of Sam Hinkie are still all over that organization because look at what they did. Like they were able to move Robert Covington eventually as part of a trade for Jimmy Butler. Covington's a guy you don't find without Hinkie either. So there's layers to it. I think to say that he didn't have a plan is unfair and that the execution was too like
abrupt or
callous.
Callous, that's the word.
Extreme, I think, is the even bigger word to use. Extreme.
No, but the plan being extreme worked. How he handled everything on the periphery was what the issue was.
I'm just flat out never going to agree that the process, like I get there is an argument for it. I just personally, I never saw Sam Hinkie build a winning team. So based off of that precedent, I'm personally never going to agree.
My one follow-up would be if you don't go through the process when you are on the clock in that situation, is Joel Embiid your pick?
He was the 3rd pick that year, right?
He was.
Yeah. And knowing that he's going to miss, we didn't think he was going to miss 2 years.
Right.
But you knew that he was dealing with issues. It seemed like it was in the ether that maybe he wouldn't ever play during his rookie season. That is probably not a decision, even if you think you're on a gradual timeline, that most of these general managers, executives, czar of basketball operations, whatever the hell they're called now, they're probably not making that decision because of there needs to be some immediacy on your returns. And there's value in having that type of patience, whether you have ulterior motives behind it or not.
Which is an argument for why he originally wanted to, and the book lays this out. He originally wanted to work out Porzingis, more of a project, and KB did everything he could to go nowhere near a Philadelphia workout, knowing what they do with their assets.
Which again goes back to the periphery as opposed to the plan to get the players on the court.
Look, I am humble enough to acknowledge there is an argument like it worked. Okay. If you want to go down that path, I just don't think it like personally did. Having said that, what the bigger thing I'm anti, and this is Dan where you can get into more of the larger Knicks conversation over the last couple of days, is what the process did to every other fan base in thinking that the only good thing about your team every night is losing games and rooting against your young players getting experience in games that may not win you a championship, but is good experience, as John said, to build good habits. This 3-game winning streak that the Knicks are on, the amount of this ruined the tank. Why didn't Jericho Sims play more minutes? Well, how about this? Like, getting RJ Barrett good experience to like experiencing winning games, getting to see quickly induce be successful and it leading to a victory is a good thing. And in the flattened lottery era, like tanking is not the only way to succeed. And the tweet I sent out last night that I immediately muted because I wanted no part of a conversation. It was just a statement. And then I'm going to bed. Like, there are so many other examples of teams that built from the middle up. The summer of 2019, which we as Knicks fans thought was going to be this magical offseason where we tanked, got Zion, and then Katie and Kyrie were right behind us. Well, guess what? We tanked. 2 teams that didn't got 2 picks higher than us. And listen, I love RJ Barrett, got 2 players better than RJ Barrett. And then the two guys that we thought were coming here went to a team that didn't tank and made the playoffs. They were a 7 seed and they were like, oh, they're building like organizational confidence. We should go there because they're closer rather than a team that's just losing for the sake of trying to win.
And this is the other part of this discussion. I want to bring it back to you, Dan. In major markets, which is why the tanking discussion for 24-ish other NBA teams is, I think, slightly different than it is for if you play in New York, Los Angeles, I guess Golden State, because people seem to like the Bay Area. I've only been to the Bay Area once. It seems like a lovely place. And Miami. We just talked about the process a lot. We should note that as we talk about this Knicks team, the math is quite a bit different. And Dan, I'm curious if you think it makes a difference in, like, again, how fans root or don't root for things at this point of the year, because what it used to be was guaranteed a top 4 pick if you finished with the worst record in the league, and you had a 2/3 chance of getting a top 3 pick. Now, 50-50, you're getting either 5th or bottom 4. And then it's and you could fall to 5th as opposed to falling to 4th. And then obviously there's a trickle down effect from there. So if you finish with the 2nd worst record, not as good a chance at all the good stuff, third worst record, so on and so forth. Do you think that changes how a fan base should look at the end of a season like the one the Knicks are in right now?
I think it absolutely should. And when you look at the Knicks case specifically, just being so far ahead of the Pacers, who are the next team below them in the East, what are you tanking towards at this point? And even if you were going that route, and it's also the difference of, even if you were to move up a couple spots, we're talking about instead of a 3% chance at the first overall pick, you get like 6 or 7.5. When you're looking at sort of the tippy top of, if you want to call them the tanking rankings or the worst teams, I think there's something to be said, like, because they're flattened, because if you have the worst record, you can technically drop all the way down to 5th. You should maybe be a little bit more selective in how you're going about it. I think what's interesting, though, is that the play-in seems to have solved a lot of this too, by teams are actively trying to get a top 10 seed, where it's, we will make win now trades. And that sort of allows other teams to not so much tank and still just be bad. Where I think the Spurs might be a good example this year, where it's, they traded Derek White, but like they were never just, and they didn't play Thaddeus Young for a while, but like they haven't all out tanked, but they've now just organically opened minutes for some of the youngsters on their roster. They're still okay. They're still watchable. So I think the way that the odds are now, coupled with the play-in, of course, I think it absolutely needs to change the way we look at tanking. I still view it as more of just a longevity discussion, because there are going to be 1-year tanks, if we call them that, like sort of what the Pacers have done. It's how long are they lasting? Or as we discussed earlier at the top, is just the inadvertency behind some of these like more long-standing, really bad situations. Shout out Sacramento still. Those are more concerning to me than the conversation of tanking.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And it's like, but again, I look at the Pacers and I kind of think about the Thunder in different situations, to be clear, but like the Pacers kind of had a pretty good organizational culture. I know the coach did not work out by any stretch of the imagination last year. They seem like they've kind of righted the ship. Things seem okay there for the most part. So it's like they could lose a bunch of games. And like, I think people in Indy still feel pretty good about things. Whereas, and this is why I'm happy you brought it up, that it's like, it is really situation specific. With the Knicks, like, I don't know, the perception, if they finished after a 4 seed last year with the 5th or the 6th worst record in the league, I don't know, something about that rubs me, like it worries me a little bit, especially when, again, they could finish with the 5th or 6th worst record in the league, and there's a very decent chance they still get the 7th or 8th pick in the draft. So, and then you bring in the conversation about like, well, how would the Knicks even tank? Which is why for me, it goes back to not anything that they've done this season, not anything Tom Thibodeau's done, not anything like, it goes back to like the decisions made by the front office back in like 2019 and 2020, like when they signed guys like Julius Randle and Marcus Morris and like Bobby Portis to play heavy minutes, as opposed to like trotting Kevin Knox and like Frank Ntilikina out there. That to me is where the shift happened. I just like, I don't know, Andrew, do you think that they're like, what would a tank even look like for the Knicks for the rest of the season? Because I don't even know what the answer to that question is.
Well, there's an important distinction you just made for the rest of the season. I'd argue for like 3 weeks, playing Kemba Walker 30 minutes a night, playing Alec Burks a bunch of minutes a night.
No,
only
listen,
playing your young players.
No,
what?
Do not put Alec Burks in the same conversation as Kemba Walker.
Putting Alec Burks out of position. How's that?
Still not as bad.
Not as bad. No, I agree with you. I'm not. Listen, this is just real. This is the point we've reached, Dan. Okay.
How much Kemba Walker did you watch this season, Dan? If the answer is none, I applaud you, because
I've seen enough Kemba Walker to know that he's washed. I guess I'm far enough removed from seeing Kemba Walker to where I would definitively say I prefer Alec Burks at point guard, like playing out of position. So, but
that's fair. It was,
I was so high on Kemba's addition. I'm just saying.
We all were.
We all and listen, again, the guy, whether he deserves it or not, he won a conference player of the month. Like, he can still dial it back. It's just the fit was never right. And that more than his ability or inability at this point, that was the tanking aspect of it more than anything. Anyway, Andrew,
I gotta make an unnecessary correction. He won a player of the week when the Knicks.
What did I say?
You played conference player of the month.
Oh, sorry. Player of the week. Yeah.
Very important distinction. He won one player of the week award when he played 3 bad teams. This is the Celtics pre whatever they are now.
Yes. Sorry.
He played the Hawks and he played the Wizards. This is like the bad versions of all 3 of these teams.
After he was off for.
So that's how you
weeks?
get Kemba going. Give him off for 27 days. And then like you might get 3 really good games. Love you, Kemba. It's the anniversary today of the cardiac Kemba shot in the Big East tournament.
Oh my God, it is
an amazing moment that seems like a decade ago. Hey, guess what? Because it is. So the important distinction is that I thought they were like sneaky tanking, but in the worst way. Like, there was no point if you're going to maximize these veterans that aren't going to be here, and Obi's playing 7 minutes and Quickly's playing 15 and getting benched in the Laker game, and like Deuce isn't seeing the floor. Like, if you're not playing any of the kids and trying to make the play in with these vets, then yeah, that I think is like an annoying way to tank and the wrong way to go about it. The way they're doing now, like I guess the way tanking would look like is you shut down Mitchell Robinson and like Jericho Sims is starting and then Quickly is starting. And like, it's a sneaky way of what the...
my question would be, in the Knicks instance, like tanking for them might actually be shutting down some of the younger players.
Some of the younger players because they're better. They're better than
Right.
some.
No, like you just mentioned quickly starting. Like there have been, I think, smart people who have been like, yes, Emmanuel Quickly should start at point guard, not for any other reason other than that he's the best player for the job since like November.
I guess my answer to your question is more like, I don't think there is like a way for the Knicks to tank anymore. I think they actually are in a good position.
That's my point. Point.
They're in a good position where the younger players will find roles and, more importantly, minutes going forward. The Cam Reddish injury sucks, but like Quentin Grimes might be back sooner rather than later, and then he can slide in right to that role and take minutes. The big question I have is Derrick Rose actually going to come back and make this an actual race for the 10th seed? And then like if that means Deuce is going to get the go to the bench as a result, then that's a little bit malpractice. But what they have now, I think I like.
Yeah.
What's up, Dan?
I was gonna say that's a little. I just feel like that's what I wouldn't even call that tanking. It just doesn't seem smart to bring Derrick Rose back at all. It's just let's see what he looks like next season, because the fact that he is so mission critical to like the way that offense needs to operate. Dating back to last season he's the most mission critical part. It scares me. Like that's not something in 2022, excuse me. You should not be that tethered. Your livelihood shouldn't be that tethered to Derrick Rose. But now, especially, you have all the other options in the youngsters. And I think both of you have now sort of alluded to this. Tanking is really for teams that don't have enough players or prospects to explore. Mm-hmm. And the Knicks, I would argue, and I'll boil it down to one player. Getting this type of usage and functional role from RJ Barrett, seeing what he can do in it when he's attacking the basket, when he has all this additional responsibility, it is more valuable, in my personal opinion, to their future than even if they leapt up and entered with, like if they had top 5 lottery odds, because RJ Barrett is at least more of a tangible possibility of being the it guy where you don't know what you're getting in the draft. And he might be someone that can be the basis or the second largest basis for everything you do. And so getting that information from him is far more important to me than if you lose games doing it, fine. If you win games, whatever. But because he exists and they're sort of not working from this position of emptiness, and there are players beyond RJ. I want to make Emmanuel Quickly, of course, let me make that clear. I would also argue you can't tank if Deuce McBride is going to play, you can't tank. That just doesn't happen.
No. I'm happy you brought up Deuce because because to me, the tanking discussion is going to come to a head, as both of you were saying, if and when Derrick Rose is healthy enough. Because could you imagine if there is a point where, let's say, with a dozen games to go, they are 2 games back of the 10th seed, right? Let's say they're, let's make something up. They're tied with Washington, and like they're 2 games back of Atlanta and like 3 games back of Charlotte, right? With 12 to go. So like feasible, right? Derrick Rose is there. I love me some Deuce McBride. Deuce McBride's fucking amazing. I want to see Deuce McBride play 48 minutes every night and 5 more minutes of overtime. Derrick Rose is a better player today than Deuce McBride. I don't think anyone would dispute that. Is there an argument that like, okay, if we give Derrick Rose 25, 30 minutes a night, that might make the difference for us between making a play-in and not making a play-in. And then if we make it, we'll get more experience, right? For your RJ Barretts and your Emmanuel Quickleys and maybe your Obi Toppins and your like whoever else in a high level playing. And God forbid we win the play-in game or win 2 playing games, like more playoff experience. Is that worth it? And I don't necessarily think there is a right or a wrong answer, as opposed to the alternative of like, no, we're going to shut Derrick Rose down. We're going to play Deuce McBride those 25 minutes, come what may. We don't really care. Like, to me, that gets into the real nitty gritty of this. And I do think it's complicated. I'm not going to pretend I feel strongly one way or the other.
It is also hard to muster strong feelings for the Knicks specifically when it's, like if the numbers played out as they were right now, they're looking at the 9th or 10th pick, let's say, and if you made the play-in and you fell to like 14, if you didn't like make it out of the play-in, or 13 or whatever you end up being, there's like, I don't really know what the opportunity cost is, especially in this draft where I haven't dove knee deep into the draft just yet, but it feels like people are high on a lot of guys at the top, but then after that, it starts to taper off.
There's a top 3, maybe 4, depending on your feelings about Paolo Banchero and Jaden Ivey. So it's like, but after 4, it's like, it's a crapshoot. Yeah. So Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I this is more a consistent thought about the draft in general. You know this from my conversation with our buddy Yash today, because he's raving about how the Jets have drafted over the past couple of years and is ready to say that they're not in the same conversation as the Knicks or my beloved New York Mets on snake-bitten fan bases.
Yash is an idiot, but continue.
How's that crow treating you, John?
It's up there.
A little backstory, Dan. So John had a long history of doubting one Rowan Alexander Barrett Jr. And Yash, the king of optimism, said that RJ's got all NBA teams and all-star games for his future. And what was it? Not for your birthday. Was it a Christmas present?
Oh, no, he just sent it randomly.
Oh, he just randomly sent him a crow.
A crow showed up at my door one day.
You need to showcase that as RJ takes the leap. So every post game that RJ has a good game, John features the crow.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's the story behind the crow. Anyway, I think drafts are mostly about development and more about nailing the pick wherever it is. I don't remember a lot of people telling me Donovan Mitchell was going to be the best or second best player of his draft, but fell to 13. Utah made a pick, did their scouting correctly. It's documented that Walt Perrin went in and had heavy influence. It was this is the guy we got to get. And they nailed the pick. Same thing can go for Miami with Bam and Tyler Hero. Same thing can go with the Des Bane pick. The Giannis pick is a little more random because nobody knew what to do with him. It was just this people. I know Simmons has talked about how watching Giannis tape on highlights on YouTube was is he playing in a seventh graders league? He just looks bigger than everybody else. This can't be real. And then he came over and we see what happens. I'm way more there might be by the experts right now that's only a 3-player draft. And that's why Knicks fans are we got to get one of these 3 players. Or maybe this is the year that the 11th pick in the draft ends up being a blue chip prospect because we now have the guy, Walt Perrin, that found the diamond in the rough, like a Donovan Mitchell or a Rudy Gobert. And maybe just nail the pick whenever you have it.
It's funny you mentioned the 11th pick real quick, and then we'll finish up. So there was an article back in 2014. Dan, I'm sure you've seen it. Andrew, I'm sure you've probably seen it too. Put out by 538, which they went through win shares by draft pick, and they plotted it all on a graph. And it's a nice little sliding scale where it's pretty clear. It's but the first pick is people think that it's there's the first pick value is so high, and then second a little bit down, third a little bit down. No. The first pick is in a tier of its own. The first pick, I mean, Markelle Fultz is of the world aside and Anthony Bennett's aside, that pick is a special pick. After that, there's kind of a group of 2, 3, 4, 5 in some order. And then you kind of drop down, but there's a consistent thing. That article was from 2014. So today, because I am just a massive loser, spent the better part of an hour plotting the same thing for the drafts from 2015 to 2019. And same thing in terms of the first pick in terms of win shares produced by first picks, even with Fultz and even with Zion not really producing a lot of win shares because he hasn't played a lot, far and away the most. Do you want to know what the second highest win share total is?
This is from 2014 to now?
From 2015 to 2019. So the next 5. I didn't do 2020 or 2021 because it's so recent.
Giannis was 13, right?
No, that was a previous draft. You just said it. It's the 11th pick. The 11th pick has the next most total win shares. And then after that, it's the second pick. And then after the second pick, it's the 27th pick. And then after after the 11th, it's the third, then the 27th, then the second, then the 22nd, then the 13th. It's it is kind of random. And I do think it matters, where you draft and what you're bringing the pick into. I don't know. And at the end of the day, I'm still a fan. I don't want to root for losses. I don't know. Dan, does that seem silly to you? I just I can't, I can't do it.
I am a Knicks fan, and I think that gets lost in what people just think that I'm accused of hating the Knicks all the time. So I'm tired of rooting for losses too. And I miss the days with this team specifically. Andrew was on the podcast before the season started, and we were arguing about whether the Knicks, instead of, trading that for getting the Hornets pick, whether they should have taken a shot at Keon Johnson or Ayo Dosunmu, I think was the other guy I wanted to take.
Okay.
I miss arguing over the hair splitting decisions like that. And that might actually be the bigger problem with this franchise, is stringing together enough of like the macro wins to where you trust that this isn't going to become a discussion anymore. Because I'm with you that there is an element of like that crapshootiness to the draft. And I'd be curious on the study that you did, like, was Gobert 27? Like, how many, like,
he's
one
from
player returns?
I'm pretty sure he's from before that, but he was the 27th pick in the draft. Yeah. So 27th has yielded a lot of fruit, by the way.
Yeah. And there's that element of randomness. And also the Knicks have not done like this. They've probably done a worse job mining value out of some of their top picks compared to like their middle and bottom picks. So I'm just trying to avoid getting any unnecessary hate in my mentions by saying that.
Listen, at this point, Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina and I'm trying to think who am I missing. These guys are with that. I hope Obi Toppin does not join this discussion, but it's not looking great right now. Anyway,
that's the thing though, is that if the Knicks had taken Halliburton, if the Knicks had taken Miles Bridges, we're not having this conversation. They would have not.
If the Knicks had taken Donovan Mitchell.
Well, like if you want to say they take one of the three players that we just mentioned, we're not having this conversation.
It's more than just three. Make a list. It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It's Mikal Bridges. It's Bam Adebayo. It's Tyler Herro's the RJ draft. But like
you could argue literally anybody after Kevin Knox, John. It's literally the next six players.
No, but that's the thing is like you look at those drafts and like I understand it's a little early with Halliburton, but like it's not even just Halliburton anymore. It's like Cole Anthony. I know he's not the most efficient guy in the world, but like dude's put up some nice numbers. He was taken 15th. You know, it wouldn't have been that crazy to take him 8th overall. Whatever.
I do want to not to like go full Obi Hive here. I do want to say there is a defense of like I want to see what he looks like with a point guard. Again,
so do I.
That's what the take has been on Obi consistently. I want to see him with like someone that's willing to use him as a stretch five, or when he starts hitting threes again, maybe you use him as a stretch. The point is like play him next to Randall, and maybe that can be an option that you use him for. The point being, a team that has needed a point guard for a while probably should have taken Halliburton, a point guard. Having said all of that, if they nail the pick, which is the general feeling I have when it comes to tanking, where Knicks fans are like, we won, that's a loss. And just what that does to like your psyche. And like, I think this even more stems from how it's done to football fans too. The Jets went 2-14 2 years ago, and they didn't win their first game until week 15. And it was Mekhi Becton's first win of his career. And he was like, finally a winner. And all he's getting is hate on Twitter because, and this like stems more to the Kendra Randall thing of like, you cost us Trevor Lawrence. It's like, I won my first NFL game and my fan base is upset with me. And that's the mentality I just flat out reject. It is not the only way to get top talent by tanking. It is one way.
It's
and
not.
As John laid out, it's kind of random. And if you nail the 8th pick or the 13th pick or the 27th pick, like none of us are worried about how many losses we had to get to that pick.
Yeah. All right. Dan, final thoughts on this wonderful topic?
I want to have strong feelings on it for the Knicks, but I think when you just look at this season standings, it's like, what would you be tanking towards? But like how much better are you improving your odds? So I'm more about the IQ minutes, the McBride minutes, this usage that we've been able to see from RJ. Those are the things that will make me still watch this team, even when they presumably fall out of the playoff race. And I think Andrew mentioned this before. When you really start to think of like what it does to your draft stock to even make the play in at this point, like the opportunity cost probably isn't that stark, especially when you measure it against what John just told us about the randomness behind the draft. So there are a bunch of different things they could do. I think as long as they're playing the players they need more information on most, and then giving opportunity for guys like RJ and Emmanuel quickly to play through certain things or in different type of capacities, that is the most valuable thing that they can do from here on.
Here's what there's no justification for: not playing those younger players in favor of playing Evan fucking Fournier. No offense, Evan. We love you.
Yes, but offense, please.
Mrs. Fournier is going to tweet at us, guys.
Is he married?
I think so. Wasn't his wife?
Google his name really quick and see what.
I'm not. No.
Then 30 seconds before I let you go. Who's your MVP?
My MVP is Nikola Jokic. It's not a runaway if you want to pick Embiid or Giannis.
No. We recorded a Patreon pod earlier today. He's my pick as well.
Brooklyn's.
I would enjoy the race too. This is like, we don't get races like this that often.
A lot of ton of fun. A ton of fun. Where I'm actually struggling is I think there is an argument for Giannis over Embiid, which I know is going to sound crazy, but like the numbers are just Giannis Antetokounmpo was really good. That's all. Anyway.
Can I also ask Dan how high in like if you were to put a top 10 of MVP together, where would Ja fall?
Probably in the top, I want to say 7.
Okay. Same range, John.
Yeah. Where did you guys have him?
I think I had him 5th or 6th, something like 7th, maybe 7th. I don't know. I have Luka 4th after my top 3. And then I think I have DeRozan 5th. Yeah.
DeRozan. And then it's like a jumble of Steph.
But I have to me, like, I think Luka probably should be 4th, but I think really after the top 3, I think there's a group of like 5 or 6 guys that you can conceivably have there. Yeah. To end up on the ballot.
This was our Patreon preview earlier, so it's fine to talk about because everybody can hear it. This is, you nailed it, Dan. This is like been a very exciting MVP race so far.
And who's your title pick right now today?
It has to be the Suns. I picked them preseason, and I would like to do
good for you
insufferable victory lap. So, but they're also just the best team. Like they're just going to keep winning without Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Apparently, he did come back, but like they're a machine.
I've been slow to join that. Like get fully in the deep end of that pool. I'm like waist deep. I'm like waist deep right now. But
Philly might be my number 2 pick. That's the one that I've struggled with the most because it's amazing what 2 weeks off did for James Harden's hamstring. Just magically making him look like a completely different player. So
it is. Is it too wild to take that I have Miami over Philly?
Yes.
No. Thank you.
They're so good, and like their best players haven't even played together really.
I know.
For a long period of time. So
they missed a lot of games. Yeah.
What was that, Dan?
There's Milwaukee, and like I think there are probably 5 to 7 teams that if you just told me I'm picking this team, I wouldn't argue against you. I'd be like, yeah, all right, that makes sense. I get it.
Yeah. Brooklyn on that list?
No, Brooklyn. Come on, we got to stop pretending that the Nets matter.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Shots fired.
We don't know. Let's even just assume that Kyrie Irving is able to play in more than every other third game or whatever it is at some point. Like, we don't know how Ben Simmons is going to fit there. This team is not built to defend, has barely any wings. Its front court rotation is old, imperfect, and not very versatile. Kevin Durant papers over a lot. Like, he can only do so much. And I do think it's fair to be like, I know what he did in last year's postseason, but we're allowed to ask whether his body can hold up after he's missed this much time over a 3-year span. So I'm more of, let's wait and see next year with the Nets. Although if Kyrie leaves in free agency, which I wouldn't put past him, I will officially be shocked if the Nets win a title this year. Like, that's just where I'm at. That team has been so implosive. It's not even funny anymore. It's just sad.
Thank you.
I'd be extraordinarily surprised. Can I say shocked? I don't know. I just have so much respect for Kevin Durant, but I think I'd probably be shocked too. Dan, you've been way too generous with your time. Before we leave, can you just let the folks at home know where they could get you and all your stuff?
Yes, I am always tanking downloads on the At Hardwood Knocks podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, spelled exactly as we sound. And I publish lots and lots of work covering the NBA at large at Bleacher Report. So you can check me out there as well.
Andrew, any final words before we go?
Let's go Mets. Baseball's back, baby.
I'm with Dan. I'm done.
All of you that aren't going to watch, fine. Please like my sport. I have my sport. I can't wait.
Good.
April 8th, opening
jersey
day.
That you're wearing, or
no, this is a Pete Alonso jersey that John got me for my birthday last year. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're an enabler. That's all I've heard.
I am an enabler. Yeah. It's my fault.